Hello. It is day 430. Oh, I don't know. I'm bad at math, but it's been over a month of daily YouTube videos. Today I want to talk about essentially the life-death-life cycle, but what that looks like in everyday life and in our lives, in our emotional lives, and how we change as humans. I just did a post on this on Instagram. Today is September 3rd, 2022. So I'm not sure when you're watching this video, but if you go to my September 3rd Instagram post, it's pretty much about this. But I get to talk with you about this a little more in depth because it's a video and it's not an Instagram post. Even though my Instagram posts do always, not always, but most of the time reach the character limit, which is, I believe, 2,200 characters. And I tend to always max out because I have a lot to say. So first of all, the life-death-life cycle. It's that phrasing I learned from Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who is the author of Women Who Run with the Wolves, Myths, and the book's right there, Myths and Stories of the Wild Woman Archetype. But she's a Jungian analyst, and she has done so much work in the field of the feminine psyche. And that book is just one of the best books of my life. I'm still reading it. I have not finished it. I take it very, very slow, and I read. Right now, I haven't read a lot in the past couple months. I've been doing a lot of other things, but I started reading that book in 2019, maybe 2020, and I just love it. It speaks to my soul. It speaks to, I think, honestly, the feminine psyche. It speaks to all of us at some level, even if your gender is male or man. It speaks to the feminine within us all. And so I think because of that, it's just so relatable and useful. But anyways, the life-death-life cycle phrase came from her, as far as I know. And it's this idea and truth of nature that death is only part of a cycle. It's not an ending. But our culture sees death as an ending. And so people are uncomfortable with it, they're afraid of it, and they see it as an end. So it's only natural that it would be something that provokes fear if we saw it as an absolute end. But the truth is that nothing just dies. There is no thing in nature that simply dies and then it's done. It always creates new life. If a plant dies, it goes back into the soil. If an animal dies, maybe the rotting flesh or the mold that grows on it or whatever will produce fungi or fungi. I forget how do people actually say it. The people who are really into how do you actually say it? Is it fungi? I don't remember, but that movie about fungus is so cool, and it's about mushrooms and all different types, and all of the scientists and professionals in that movie say fungi. They say it in a different way than I used to say it. Now I don't even remember how I said it. I usually don't have caffeine, but I had some today, so that's kind of why I'm gonna probably have a little more offshoots of this conversation than normal. But anyways, so there's no such thing as just death. Even if you, let's say, melt an ice cube, you could say the ice cube died, but the ice cube turns into water. And if you heat the water, you could say the water died because you don't see it anymore, but it evaporated into a different type of molecule. So we just change energetically, and it's the same for all things in nature that come and go. They don't just disappear, they just change their form. And so it's the same when a human dies. Our soul lives on, but our human body is what dies. And this is why people have a fear in a certain part of relationships to themselves and relationships to others. It's that dark emotions, if we're using this analogy, dark emotions represent death, or dark emotions are like death. They are the dark part of being human. When a relationship enters a point where it's the two people are having a lot of difficulty, there might be disconnection or arguments or not a lot of easy understanding. A lot of times that's when people leave the relationship because they think this is not good, this is bad, this is like death, right? This is the death part of a relationship. But people fail to sit with the discomfort and the dark or the hard emotions, and because they fail to sit with it and they bail out, they miss the rebirth that takes place next. So it's not to say you should tolerate abuse. That's not what this is about. If there's abuse going on in a relationship, if there's severe mental issues going on or trauma that's coming up, yes, you should definitely do something about it. But so much of healing and so much of relationships is about sitting in that discomfort, as long as it's not abusive or like life-threatening, of course. So we're not talking about that. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying and take it to that next level. This is about just the fact that people have a hard time sitting with discomfort. They have a hard time sitting with what is dark, with what feels like death to some degree. Because our culture doesn't teach us or emphasize that death is only part of a cycle. It is not an end. It is the step before rebirth. That's how rebirth happens. You wouldn't have rebirth if something didn't die. So I'll just use my relationship as an example. Anytime it's felt like it's going through some hard times and it's not the most pleasant because there's two personalities, two people working through stuff. Maybe this person is here and this person is here and we're just not seeing eye to eye. And maybe this person's stressed and this person's stressed too. And so together it's like a bad recipe. But anytime I've gone through, that's in this relationship because it's a healthier relationship than the one I had and ever had. So again, I'm saying because this is a healthy relationship in general, that's why I've seen the positive in sticking through the hard times. If you're dealing with abuse of some sort, then it's different. Then you should probably, that's not what this video is about. So anytime though I've sat through the hard part of the relationship, it's always been followed with a really beautiful, refreshing, new part in the relationship that feels like a rebirth. It feels like we've entered into the next level of this beautiful relationship, and I'm so glad we got through that. I'm so glad we stuck it out and worked through it, even though it wasn't easy, even though it was uncomfortable. Sometimes you just have to sit with it. There's actually sometimes nothing you can do. You just have to let the cycle play its course. You need to let it live out its course. You need to see it through. And that's how seasons go. We can't change winter time. Winter comes, it snows, it's dark, the sun goes away earlier, and it is a time when there's not a lot of birthing. There's things dying, there's things hibernating, there's things hiding. And so it can feel, if we were to judge winter just in this narrow scope, it would feel like a really depressing time, really sad time. But that's only when you don't have the ability to see into the future and know this season is going to produce new flowers. It's things are going into hibernation only to bloom again even stronger than they were. We're going to get new rains, we're going to get new seeds sprouted, and then a new season begins when winter is over. And all we can do is let winter take its course. When it comes to mental health and personal responsibility, there are things we can do to affect the season that we're in on a personal level. So if you find yourself in a winter or a death, a low point. Things are maybe difficult. There's healing happening. There's things surfacing that are hard to face within yourself, whatever it might be. We still, because we're not being literal here. We're not talking about the real season of winter. We're talking in metaphor. So you actually do have some control and power over how that winter is going to go for you. And I'm not saying that you should force yourself into summer, force yourself into spring and be happy and everything should be great. I do believe that we are meant to have seasons, and we are meant to have the life cycle happening within us. And so this may be a time of maybe sadness or harder emotions or healing going down that feels difficult, and you should allow it. But you can also do it in a way that is supportive and healthy, and in a way that you don't spiral into a darkness that is creating suffering. So I'm a huge proponent of not creating suffering in your life. You should sit with sadness. You should feel anger. You should feel grief and fear and all the things that we're meant to feel as humans. There's a time and place for all of those emotions. But when we sit in them for too long and we perpetuate the cycle of feeling those emotions and we don't allow those emotions to move through us, then we're creating suffering. In my opinion, a lot of times suffering happens when we haven't allowed ourselves to feel an emotion deeply. The deeper we can feel our emotions, the deeper we can heal. So in order to heal, do sit with the winter time that's happening, but remember to maintain your personal power. That means I don't have to make it a hell for myself. I don't have to make it a suffering time. I can still give myself love and nurturing and support through this time, and then it can be a deeply healing process. So the reason why I feel passionate about this topic is I feel like ever since I was young, I know this through, okay, hold on, let me just backtrack. If you're familiar with the Enneagram, I'm a type 4 on the Enneagram, specifically a self-preservation 4. There's 3 different types of 4s, just like there's 3 different types of all the other numbers. Those are called subtypes. So the subtype that I am is self-preservation 4. The type is a 4. And if you know anything about the type 4 on the Enneagram, archetypally, this archetype represents the shadow in humans, meaning the type 4 over-identifies with the shadow aspect within us all. That's also why growing up, I always felt drawn to intensity, drawn to movies that explored really heavy topics or emotions or taboo subjects. I was drawn to those conversations that were a little more, I would say, just taboo or dark, or, and that's also why I could hold space for those conversations. That's why in the earlier video I mentioned that, about your gifts. What are your gifts that people have commented on in your life? If you haven't watched that video, I do recommend it. But one of my gifts was the ability to sit with difficult emotions from other people and not judge them. The reason is because archetypally, as a 4, I'm comfortable sitting with the death aspect of life. My mom even told me, hi, she's probably watching at some point. Hi, Tavel. So she told me that as a kid, I used to always ask about death. And I think that's so interesting because later in life, I learned about the Enneagram and the archetypal psychology, and I understood the reason why I was so curious about death, and I'm sure, most kids are, but I really hung on to that concept and was always fascinated by it because the 4 is representing the shadow of society. They can also represent the shadow in a family construct. they can represent the shadow within themselves, to the point that they don't recognize their goodness, they don't recognize the gold, they don't recognize the good qualities of themselves. They tend to pay more attention to the other side, the death, the dark, their shadow aspects, and society's shadow aspects, and family's shadow aspects. That's why archetypally the four can also be somewhat, feel dangerous, or feel, they can bring up discomfort and make someone want to avoid them if that person is being triggered by the four in their life, because that person isn't comfortable with sitting with darkness or depth or their own shadow. So the four can represent that so much that often they feel people avoid them or don't want to get into these intense conversations with them because it's just too much. It's a little too much for some people. And so as a four, I learned how to tune that back, tone it down a little bit, because I realized not everyone wants to go to those depths. And it was also limiting me from seeing my good qualities and the goodness in life, the bright side of things, because I was more drawn to the dark side of things, or noticing what was wrong because of that inclination to pick up and see the shadow. But it also was limiting me in my life and in some of my relationships. So the Enneagram helps us see these aspects of ourselves, not to just own them and say, oh, I'm a four, that's just how I am, and you have a problem with darkness and I don't, so that's your problem. The Enneagram is meant to show us an overdoing of a tendency and how to help ourselves grow by seeing that. But why I started that whole thing about the Enneagram and archetypes and all of this is the life-death life cycle. I've noticed that there's a lack in how the culture views death. That the culture and people could make room for sitting with more of their discomfort, because they're avoiding it out of fear. They're avoiding it because to them, darkness, depth, and shadow is bad. To them, darkness, depth, and shadow means the end of something, or there's fear that if I go there, I'll never get out. If I experience that deep level of sadness, I will never get out of it. But that's the mistake. It's just a cycle. It's just a season. So do sit with the sadness, do sit with the fear, do sit with the anger. Allow yourself to feel what's under those things, because a lot of times when we're angry, what's underneath that is really sadness. And what's underneath sadness is something even deeper. So let yourself go there. The deeper you can go with that dark feeling inside, the deeper you can sit with that discomfort and really just own it and say, yes, I feel this. Yes, this is happening. The deeper you can heal and move through it. When you avoid it and resist, it's like you're not allowing the flow of nature to happen within you, and everything can feel like friction. If you just allow it to move, the next season will come. So that's my video for today. Yes, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.